congratulate Carmelo Anthony on a stellar career, that he surely will find himself in the Hall of Fame. So I don't want to do anything else without saying that. Give this man his proper props, proper respect. Multiple time NBA All-Star, multiple time NBA All-Team, legendary player, probably the best international player in the history of international basketball, and that's saying a huge amount. His reach and his influence goes far beyond the NBA and his contributions in the NBA. So when we think basketball and we think Basketball Hall of Fame, in many cases, there are some players who can only put up their stats and their contributions within the game on the NBA stage. But this man right here has shown he had an ability to dominate, not only in the NBA, but in the world. So with that, you have to put respect on that man's name. You have to put respect on that man's name. And I'm going to give the New York version of respect for Carmelo Anthony right now. Shout out to you. Shout out. Shout out to you, Carmelo. All right? So let's start here. When I think about my introduction to Carmelo Anthony, it was while he was in college. It was his run while he was in Syracuse. They built up momentum and they were really moving. And Jim Boeheim did a great job of talking about his young star and building him up and helping him develop while he went to college. Now, I do recall I wasn't a huge college basketball fan, but it was undeniable. Carmelo Anthony was at Syracuse. If you're in New York, Syracuse is in New York, so that was a school that he was starring at. But at the same time, they were talking about the talent that was in this draft that was upcoming. So Carmelo Anthony was setting the NCAA tournament ablaze. There was also a young player at Marquette who was doing the same for his team, building that momentum, having spots where he was shining at his school. And that young man was Dwayne Wade. But also, not even in college, there was a young man that they were putting the cape on as the next person to be the face of the NBA, to the point that they had already chosen him, called him the chosen one, and was tabbing him as King James, to be the next in line. So this was an interesting moment in time, and as you begin to think, all right, this is a great time to be one of the poor teams who'll be jockeying for the top 5 picks, because this was an outstanding class. But the facts are the facts. And Carmelo Anthony, coming out of college in that legendary draft, was the most accomplished of all 3 of those players: LeBron, D. Wade, and Carmelo, because he was able to secure the height, what everybody plays for in college. He was able to say that he was the best basketball player in the nation that year. So at that time, I remember there were multiple conversations that were being had about who was the best among them. And although they were friends, you can tell that there was a competition on a different level, and it was consistent amongst those 3. All right. This was especially true when they were trying to predict who would go in what order in that particular draft. Now, everybody had come to the general consensus that it was going to be LeBron James. You could see his all-around game. You could see that he was a phenom at a young age. No college experience was going to forego that college experience and go directly into the league. So much expectations and hype on this man, the most in NBA history. But people felt that he had the ability and the skill set to reach and possibly exceed. Actually, there were people who was doubting whether or not LeBron would reach and match the hype that he came in with. All right? But Melo was considered one of the best in the nation, and he sat on top of the college basketball world as the best. But they all went on to their own teams, and they all had expectations that they were going to be the ones to carry their respective teams into the near future. And ultimately what's happened is they didn't disappoint. They didn't disappoint when it came to that. These three young men, whether it was Carmelo Anthony with the Denver Nuggets, Dwayne Wade with the Miami Heat, or LeBron James with the Cleveland Cavaliers, you could tell that they were screen watching after their games, or maybe before their games, to see what the other player was doing. And each of them performed at levels of professionals and men who were veterans in the league. Carmelo Anthony brought a unique combination of speed, athleticism, power, and scoring ability. And those aren't really my words. Those are the words of the GOAT, one of the GOATs, Kobe Bryant.
Kobe!
Okay? When you think about LeBron James brought a different type of ability to the table. But we're going to get into that in a few moments. Carmelo would ultimately join a team where he would help his team lead his team to the conference finals when he was in Denver. All right. It's funny, as I reflected on putting this piece together, I thought back to a conversation I would have with my cousin, Prestige New York. Follow him on Twitter if you are interested, or if you're a big fan of hip hop. I love his takes on hip hop, and he gives those on Twitter. Prestige New York, follow him. But we used to always go in on basketball. He was a great basketball player himself in high school. I was Charles Oakley, so I had about 4-inch vertical off the ground, and I'd hit you with a foul. So don't drive the lane on me. Okay, and I'll hit that occasional jump shot. Water. All right, but we would have these conversations, especially at that time. He was huge. I mean, still to this day, he's a huge Carmelo Anthony fan, a huge Carmelo Anthony defender. Although Melo don't need defending, but he's a huge Carmelo Anthony defender. But very early on, we would have conversations about the two players. It had to be at least the first year or the second year. And I remember having a debate with my cousin about who we would prefer to build a team around. And he would say Carmelo Anthony, and I would say LeBron James. Okay. I said LeBron James because I saw how he made the players around him better. I remember his first few games with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay. And he had players on his team that was like, young fella's going to have to learn how to play. He's not going to come in. And so it was almost like they was hating that this young kid is going to come in. He's coming in with all this hype that he's supposed to be the next one. There's already people here. There's already people here at his position. Y'all giving him the reins, and he ain't going to take it. Like, veterans ain't going to relinquish those reins. Well, you know what? LeBron James came in and he took them. He came in and he took them. You know what I mean? Like, there was no question about it. And he ultimately gained respect. And if you see the highlights from the very first game, it was I will never forget, it was against the Sacramento Kings. It was against the Sacramento Kings, and he was picking them apart. He was putting pressure on the rim, his skill set at his height. He was a man amongst boys. And this was a team with veterans. I'm talking Vlade. But then if you watch Carmelo play, my cousin had a point as well. Carmelo was dominant. Players did not, even to this day, you hear a Paul Pierce talk about not wanting to guard Melo. You hear Kobe Bryant in many of his interviews at the end of his career talk about Carmelo being an absolute monster.